Hi, I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream. Today, the global move to ban single-use plastic straws is reaching a fever pitch. We'll take a look at why this movement caught on so quickly and who's most affected by it. I'll be looking out for your comments online at AJ Stream, and of course, we're live on YouTube.
The history of straws. Officially, straws debuted in ancient Mesopotamia, where Sumerians guzzled beer through straws of gold. In the 1950s, the rise of the automobile brought with it fast food and the desire for disposable dinnerware. Straws were officially a hit. Cheaper and easier to mass produce, plastic straws were soon everywhere. Crazy straws, magic straws, Slurpee straws, and giant straws to go with America's jumbo thirst. Billions of them are buried in landfills and litter our planet every year, winding up in oceans. No longer a harmless small item, straws are a giant menace.
But a ban on plastic straws may potentially have a huge impact on the disability community, adversely affecting health and quality of life of many. Some need straws to drink because they are unable to lift a cup to their mouths or to regulate the amount of liquid being ingested. There are also allergy concerns with alternatives, and there's the issue of access. We have a lot to discuss today. So joining us on Skype to do that, Christine Figener is a marine conservation biologist. Shilpi Chotre is Senior Communications Officer at Break Free from Plastic. Lawrence Carter-Long is Director of Communications for the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund. And Dune Ives is Executive Director of Lonely Whale, whose organization launched the Stop Sucking campaign. Welcome to the stream, everyone. Now, I want to start our conversation with a video that many point to as the impetus behind the influx of plastic straw bans that we're seeing now in the US and elsewhere. And a note to our viewers, this may be hard to watch.
So this is the reason why we do not need plastic straws.
How could that have possibly got lodged so firmly in the nostril?
I guess it's a stuck.
Oh, you're okay, honey.
Oh my god. She's bleeding from her shoulder still, but the thing is,
Yeah.
it looks in the video, it looks as if it's all coming out of her nose. But it's not. Oh
Oh,
man.
you're okay. It's almost there.
Não podemos ver ahora. Oh man. Show me, please. I want to.
Oh my god.
That is just freaking. Oh man.
So hard to watch. I was watching this morning and I had to cover my eyes slightly to see the full video. Our community feels similarly. This is Flavia on Twitter, who says that 2015 video of the sea turtle with the straw in its nose clearly made an impact. The good thing is it made people seriously examine their reliance on single-use plastics. So Christine, you shot that video. You were among the group who were with that sea turtle. And today we now have companies from McDonald's to Starbucks phasing out the use of plastic straws. Why do you think it is that this movement caught on so fast?
Well, I think the video was very emotional. I think you saw the suffering of a creature, which a lot of people react to. And it's very obvious that it was suffering from an item that we use in our everyday life. So I think that is probably the reason why it had such a huge impact and made hopefully a lot of people reconsider their plastic uses.
Dune, what did that video do for you? Do you remember where you were when you saw it and what you felt?
So at Lonely Well, when we started looking at the issue of plastic pollution and we looked at all the single-use items out there, we kept coming back to this straw as a potential way in to raise awareness about plastic pollution at large. And that turtle video certainly did have an impact. I think it's always hard to see an animal in the wild being hurt by something that was man-made, that it's the result of our carelessness. You know, somebody had that straw for 15 minutes, maybe they had that straw for 2 hours and they couldn't find a way to get it into the trash can. And so instead, it made its way out into the water. But it's really indicative of the larger plastics crisis that we have on our hands right now that we need to really deal with.
And in part, likely, why you started this campaign. I pulled this up on my screen here, Lonely Whale. Hashtag stop sucking on plastic straws. Share this video as your pledge and challenge your friends to do the same. I'd like to share with our audience what that video looks like.
Let me see you move that body. And all the boys, I wanna see you showing out. And all the girls, I wanna see you break it down. Let me see you move that body. Let me see you move that body.
So, Dune, it's catchy, clearly. Tell us about the thinking behind this campaign and the idea of the octopus smacking straws out of celebrities' hands.
Well, it's funny. You know, I think that's part of what we were really going after is doing something that really sparked a conversation and woke people up a little bit. I mean, if you remember 2 years ago, even with the turtle video, very few of us were actually talking about plastic pollution. It was very little coverage in the media. We weren't really talking about it. And we thought, you know, there's a lot of people out there who suck on single-use plastic straws every day that don't need them. And we need to focus in on them. I will share. Early on, one of our targets in our hearts was if we could just get Kim Kardashian to stop sucking, then maybe we can actually talk about plastic pollution. And her friend just called her out, I think it was today or yesterday, for sucking with single-use plastic water bottles and single-use plastic straws that she and her family don't need. And so why do they promote, conscious consumerism or conspicuous consumerism so much? So that was really our intent behind the campaign, is make it playful and raise awareness so that we can really culture hack pop culture.
Mm-hmm. I love that idea. And we did see our team here that she did talk about it on her Instagram story. So there is that. I want to bring in another voice, though, that many people in the abled community may not have thought about when they think about straws and the straw ban. And we're actually hearing from a lot of people in the community of people with disabilities. This is a video comment that we got that I'd like to play from Matthew Shapiro. He's a public speaker here in Richmond, Virginia, and this is what he told the stream about this straw ban.
As a person with a disability, I'm very frustrated by the recent ban on plastic straws. People with disabilities need straws out in their communities so that they can have access to beverages and drink like anyone else would. And the alternatives for these plastic straws don't always work. I was recently in South Africa and had a biodegradable straw in one of my beverages, and it melted. So it was somewhat harder to drink that beverage. And I am just overly frustrated that once again, the disability community was not consulted when it comes to solutions like this, because this does affect people with disabilities. And I really want us to come up with a solution to this straw issue that will make life easier rather than harder for people with disabilities.
Lawrence, there's a hashtag online that goes along with this. It's ableism sucks, playing on the Stop Sucking campaign. What do you think is the biggest impact on the community of people with disabilities?
Well, I think it's really one of process and participation when we're talking about large-scale issues like this. In big cities like Seattle, the question we have to ask is who was involved in those conversations, who was left out of those conversations, who was consulted and who wasn't. If you're not consulting people with disabilities, then you're not going to be learning from our experience, our expertise, and the insights that we have. And that's really the biggest issue here. I think that this whole controversy could have been avoided if the right people with disabilities had been asked about this issue before it became a controversy rather than after the fact. And so now what we're seeing is that cities like Seattle are having to go in and clean up the mess they made by not talking to us first. In New York City, They're rewriting the laws now to include the concerns of people with disabilities, and actually looks like they're going to make it mandatory to include options that people with disabilities can use, including plastic straws. In other places, like San Francisco, just down the road from me here, they've got a provision there that allows for plastic straws for people with disabilities or medical needs, but no mandate saying that plastic straws should be made available or must be made available for people that need them. So when we're making these decisions, we can't put an undue burden on people that are already burdened. You know, people with disabilities already have to think ahead 3 times, 4 times. How are they going to take the bus? Is the BART going to work? How are they going to get to that restaurant? We don't want to make sure that we're adding more of a burden on them by saying, oh, you also have to carry your own straw.
Lawrence, absolutely. It's absolutely great to meet you. Break Free from Plastic is a global movement of 1,300 NGOs, and we fully agree that progress on plastic pollution should not come at the expense of the disabled community. In fact, we look very forward to working more closely with you. One of our member organizations, Greenpeace, and others like Lonely Whale are also actively engaging the disability community, as all environmental NGOs should. We believe that governments and corporations have plenty of resources to come up with options that provide the disabled community with what they need, while also tackling the plastic pollution crisis. And in the meantime, absolutely, restaurants and cafes should have a limited number of plastic straws upon request.
Yeah, that's right. I think that the solutions are pretty simple. It's if you don't need a plastic straw, by all means, don't use one. If you can use a reusable straw, use it. If you need a plastic straw, they should be made available. What I'd like to get here from you folks, which I think would put people's minds at ease, is a guarantee that you're going to go to those local cities where these bans are being initiated, and you're going to talk to the protection and advocacy groups. You're going to talk to the independent living centers. You're going to talk to people on the ground and say, we'll be including people in this community, in this decision, before the decision is made. I think that would go a long way in building those alliances and allegiances that we need.
And Lawrence, I'm so glad that this movement is bringing this conversation to light. So admittedly, I feel like as a small organization, we could have done more in reaching out to the disability community early on. We do have a few members of the disability community with cerebral palsy, with MS, with MD, with autism, even stroke victims that we've consulted with really early on, and single-handedly every single time they've said what we really need is we need a single-use plastic straw. I haven't heard until recently the bendability as a really key feature that is needed to be included, and so all of our training materials with all restaurateurs, with bartenders, hotels, airlines, you name it, includes a section where we talk a lot about the disability community. Make sure you have an ample supply on hand. And then we're not a policy organization, but we work with NGOs that really do look at policy as a solution. We're firm believers that the market leads the way. And so in working with those policymakers and those organizations, we've encouraged them to include a provision in the policy language for the disability community. We've advocated on behalf of the disability community in our testimony in New York City, in San Francisco. And so we're not experts, we can't speak from the place that you can speak from, but we'd really love not only to work on this with you for straws, but all single-use plastic items, because this is a movement that's underway, and there's no reason why we can't address the needs of the disability community and environmental needs at the exact same time. I firmly believe it, and so we're totally in.
So Gus, I want to jump in here just because I want to bring in our community, and I hate to have to pause this very vivid conversation we're having, but I want to bring in the people that are watching. This is an anecdote I will share. It's a 3-part anecdote. So on the one hand, you have HG Flores saying, why not use a metallic reusable straw? So there's one suggestion from a member of our community. Robert here says, how do you clean them after use? If your Parkinson's means you shake so much you can no longer write, hold a cup, or dress yourself. So there's one pushback to why people are not just using certain alternatives. But then we got this via YouTube Live. Rahel says, I already have metal straws and reduce my plastic waste. But honestly, I believe we should ban fishing before we ban straws, especially banning straws that affects people with disabilities. So Christine, I want to bring you in here on this because so many people have pointed out online and other places that straws are just the low-hanging fruit here. There are other bigger issues that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, and they're absolutely not incorrect about it. But, and I think the plastic issue is so overwhelmingly big by now that putting the lever at just one place is not enough at this point anymore. So yes, I mean, I'm a marine biologist, so I know what efforts we make to try to improve the fishing gear that is getting lost at sea. But it's not only the plastic. So, and actually, I would say in even numbers, my turtles, for example, are equally affected by plastic bags and other items that we use, at home and not by fishing line. So I think really that I'm coming from a conservationist point of view. Every time you're trying to implement change, especially in the face of endangered species or the environment, you will always meet people that come from a disadvantaged point. And it's really difficult for one person to put yourself in your shoes because you don't have those problems. So for example, I work with people that are just really poor, and of course for them it's difficult to buy different things, different fishing gear, for example. And I think it's sometimes not intentionally that we're excluding groups, and we don't want to do that, but it's all about coming back together, sitting down at a table and discussing the options without going back in time and actually repeating the same errors. For example, continue to use plastics, but it's not really necessary and shouldn't be done anymore.
Go ahead, Lawrence.
I think it's also important, I don't just want to put the burden on environmental groups or NGOs or advocacy organizations. Seattle Public Utilities is a city agency, and they didn't make any significant outreach to the disability community. They said in September 2017 they had an informal advisory committee, but won't answer anybody's questions about who they talked to. I reached out to the people in Seattle. I asked, and I heard they didn't talk to their own Disability Policy Commission, nor to Disability Rights Washington, nor to the ARC, nor to Open Doors for Multicultural Families, or to the Alliance of People with Disabilities. And so we've got to go back to the lawmakers who are making these decisions, people who are proposing these bills, and make sure that they're reaching out to the disability community as well.
So I want to share this based on what you're saying there, Lawrence. This is a tweet that's made the rounds from Spoony Warrior, who says, how the great straw debate should have gone. Ban straws, disabled folks. Some of us depend on straws and can't use alternatives. A ban could kill us. Ableds, okay. Ban balloons. Instead, we got, you're just selfish. Don't you care about the planet? Fakers, try harder. So we got a video comment from someone who thinks along those same lines and explains to us why some of these alternatives won't work. This is Andrea, and June, I'll direct this to you.
As a full-time wheelchair user with significant muscle weakness, I need plastic straws in order to access beverages. The proposed alternatives are not viable options because they pose other concerns. For example, paper straws disintegrate and metal straws are difficult to clean independently. In short, banning plastic straws is an assault on my independence.
So June, taking that in mind, what went wrong in Seattle and what would you have done differently?
So when we first spoke with Seattle Public Utilities, it was about maybe a couple of weeks before we launched our Strawless in Seattle campaign. And maybe it was three weeks before we launched our Strawless in Seattle campaign. And really it was to say, hey, we just wanted to let you know that we're launching this campaign. Here's everybody who signed up. Is there anything that we should know about? And then about a week into the campaign is when they lift the exclusion on the rule, which does allow for compostable plastic straws, which tend to act exactly like plastic straws. Now, some of those compostable plastic straws are made from corn, and somebody who has pretty severe food allergies, I'm very sensitive to those who have food allergies. So I don't know if that is a viable alternative for everyone. It probably is not. But given the feedback that we had received already from folks in the disability community, it seemed like the compostable plastic straws were going to be good. And that was after doing a test. Like, I love her video and I love her comment. Paper straws disintegrate. Especially, I mean, it doesn't matter if you're abled or disabled, paper straws, unless you use, there's only one that could potentially work even in the abled community. They're not a great alternative. Bamboo are expensive. Bamboo are hard to hold. I can't use a stainless steel straw. It actually breaks the teeth of some members of the cerebral palsy community. With the silicone tip, it could work a little bit better, but glass straws, and all of those are really difficult to clean. it doesn't matter if you're able or disabled. They're just difficult to work with. I mean, it's hard to think about those as viable alternatives. But I think more can be done.
They're not really viable alternatives. That's what Andrea is telling you. And if they're not usable, one size doesn't fit all. That's really the problem here. So if you have a condition like Parkinson's disease or you're a stroke survivor, you might have difficulty controlling your bite, right? So you're not going to want to bite into a glass straw or you can't, a metal straw, you could break your teeth. Paper, as she said, turns to mush. And so until we have an option, and I think we can get there by working together, that is more workable, that can work for more people, plastic straws are simply going to be an option for, a necessary option for the majority of disabled people. And that's why, again, we have to be part of that conversation. New York is rewriting its proposed law because disabled people got involved. That's because the people in New York got embarrassed because they didn't include us. Here we are, 29 years after the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We're going to have 1,000 people at the National Council on Independent Living Conference marching on Washington, D.C. tomorrow, on Tuesday, July 24th, to say, let's not take steps backwards. Let's make sure that people with disabilities are included on every conversation. We have a saying in the disability rights movement that says, nothing about us without us. I think that should just be shortened to nothing without us. Period.
I would agree with that. Lawrence, I definitely agree with that. I wanted to share with our audience, in case they're wondering what this huge stick is on my table, that this is a bamboo straw. I'm trying to do my part. I love straws. I don't need them, but I like them, and so I am trying it out. It's not my favorite so far, I will say, but I want to shift the conversation a little bit to corporations and what they are doing about this. Shilpi, I pulled up this here from the Starbucks newsroom. McDonald's joined Starbucks and Closed Loop Partners as founding member of Initiative to End Cup Waste. Starbucks says that straws are out, lids are in. They've announced environmental milestone. You can see their new lids that people have criticized. And they also sent us a statement directly to Al Jazeera here at the stream. Starbucks says that they are committed to continuing to offer straws to customers who need them or request them in their stores, but that sustainability is part of their DNA and has been for 30 plus years. Shilpi, you're writing a letter to CEOs. Why? What do you think about this?
Yeah, well, this incredible attention to straws is obviously a huge step forward in the fight against plastic pollution, but banning straws can be an effective mobilization tool for the public only if it's connected to the broader plastic pollution life cycle. Since much of our waste and even recycled plastic waste is coming from the global north and ending up in cities and towns across Southeast Asia. So many of us at Break Free from Plastic were sort of scratching our heads when Starbucks decided to ditch the straws, only to replace them with a thicker plastic lid. So we need to be thinking bigger, bolder, and also globally as we progress on this issue, while including the disability community in these conversations. But straw bans alone are not going to solve the problem.
Christine?
Yeah, I think just listening to it and coming again from a scientist's point of view, I think, when we allow ourselves to just sometimes take a step backwards and look at all of what's happening, I think, social justice is very important, but in the broader scheme of things, none of this actually matters if we don't have a planet to live on, right? So I think we really need to think of how we can, and very quickly, solve this problem. And that means we have to not just, it shouldn't be a monoculture concerning straws or plastic straws, but I really think we need to look at all the unnecessary plastics that are there and not letting corporations such as Starbucks, for example, off the hook by just banning straws and then putting, a bigger lid on the whole thing. So we need to follow up, right? And saying, hey, okay, this was just the first step, right? So what is your next step?
I think the follow-up is important, which is why I know we will revisit this issue on our show. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for now. Thank you to all of our guests for joining us today, and to our community, which is where I will give the last word. This is the last plastic straw tweeting in. We are not for straw bans. We are for source reduction of single-use plastics and exemptions for those who need them. The focus on plastic straws as part of the bans is giving a much-needed voice to people with disabilities, and we are listening. This conversation will continue online. We'll see you there.